The heat from Kepler 442b's twin suns beat down on the volcanic plains as Jake Mitchell wiped sweat from his forehead. He'd been out here for hours, collecting rock samples and scanning mineral deposits. It was boring work, the kind that made his mind wander. That's when he heard it. A sound so faint he almost missed it over the wind. A weak, pitiful crying that didn't belong in this desolate wasteland. Jake followed the sound, climbing over jagged rocks until he found the source. His breath caught in his throat. There, wedged between two boulders, was a dragon hatchling. Not just any dragon but a Dralvex. One of the most feared creatures in the known galaxy. But this one wasn't fearsome at all. It was dying. The little creature was roughly the size of a golden retriever, maybe a bit smaller. Its black scales, which should have gleamed like polished stone, were cracked and dull, covered in a layer of volcanic dust. One wing stuck out at a wrong angle, clearly broken. The other was torn, the delicate membrane shredded. Its ribcage showed through its skin, each bone visible with every shallow breath it took. The hatchling's amber eyes, clouded with pain and exhaustion, tracked Jake's movement with barely any awareness. Jake knelt down slowly, his scientific mind racing through everything he knew about Dralvex biology. These weren't just dangerous animals. They were intelligent apex predators who had built an empire that spanned dozens of star systems. Their culture was brutal and efficient. Mother dragons laid multiple eggs, and when the hatchlings emerged, only the strongest survived. The weak ones were simply left behind to die. It was natural selection taken to its extreme. This little one had clearly been deemed unworthy by its mother and abandoned here to perish alone. Every bit of Jake's training told him to walk away. The protocols were crystal clear. Don't interfere with alien species' natural processes. Don't risk contamination. Don't bring potentially dangerous organisms into human habitats. And definitely don't try to rescue a baby dragon that could grow up to be a 20-ton killing machine. The rule book practically screamed at him to leave it alone. But Jake had never been good at following rules when something felt wrong. He looked into those fading amber eyes and saw something that transcended species. Fear. Loneliness. A desperate will to live that was flickering like a candle in the wind. His hands were reaching for the creature before his rational mind could stop them. The hatchling was lighter than he expected, almost hollow-boned like Earth's ancient pterosaurs. Its heart hammered against his chest in rapid, weak beats. The creature didn't fight him, didn't snap or claw. It simply lay in his arms, too exhausted even to be afraid. Jake felt its breath, hot and ragged, against his uniform. "Not today, little one," Jake whispered, adjusting his grip to support the broken wing. "I've got you now." The walk back to the research outpost felt like it took forever. Jake's mind spun with what he was about to do. This would end his career. At best, he'd be reprimanded and sent back to Earth. At worst, he'd face criminal charges for violating first contact protocols. But every time he looked down at the dying creature in his arms, those consequences seemed distant and unimportant. The outpost came into view, a cluster of prefabricated buildings connected by pressurized walkways. Jake headed straight for the medical bay, only to find his colleague Lisa Chen blocking the entrance. Lisa was the station's medical officer, a sharp woman with zero tolerance for nonsense. Her dark eyes widened when she saw what he was carrying. "Jake, what in the hell is that?" Her voice was a mix of shock and anger. "She needs help." Jake tried to push past her, but Lisa planted herself firmly in the doorway. "That's a Dralvex hatchling. Do you have any idea what you're doing? Those things grow up to be war machines. Killing is literally in their DNA." Lisa's hand moved toward the security alarm on the wall. "Lisa, please. Just look at her." Jake adjusted his hold so Lisa could see the creature's condition. "She's starving. Her wing is broken. She won't last another hour out there." Lisa's professional instincts warred with her common sense. She stepped closer, her trained eye assessing the hatchling's condition. The creature's breathing was labored, its pulse weak and thready. Despite her reservations, Lisa was a healer first. She sighed and stepped aside. "The review board is going to have both our heads for this," she muttered, but she was already pulling up medical protocols on her tablet. Jake carried the hatchling into the medical bay and laid her gently on the examination table. The metal surface was cold, designed for equipment storage rather than patients, but it would have to do. The creature didn't even twitch. Her eyes were barely open now, just thin slits of amber in her dark face. "We need nutrients fast. She's hours from organ failure." Lisa was already moving, pulling supplies from storage lockers. "Problem is, we have no idea what Dralvex hatchlings eat. All our data is on adult warriors. They're carbon-based, same as us. Start with a basic protein slurry and mineral supplement. Jake's fingers flew over the medical computer, pulling up every scrap of information the human database had on Dralvek's biology. It wasn't much. Most of it came from battlefield autopsies and long-range observations. Together, they mixed a compound of synthesized proteins, amino acids and trace minerals. Jake added calcium and phosphorus, guessing that a creature with scales and bones would need them. The mixture looked like gray sludge, unappetizing even by medical food standards, but it was the best they could do. The hardest part was getting the hatchling to drink. She was so weak she couldn't even lift her head. Jake had to support her while Lisa carefully dripped the mixture into her mouth with a syringe. At first, nothing happened. Then, some deep survival instinct kicked in. The hatchling's throat worked, swallowing the nutrient mix in weak gulps. Her amber eyes flickered with a tiny spark of awareness. "That's it, girl. Come on, keep going." Jake kept his voice low and soothing, the way he'd talk to a frightened animal. He decided right then to call her Ash, after the volcanic ash that had covered her when he found her. Over the next hour, they managed to get about half a liter of the mixture into her. It wasn't much, but it was something. Ash's breathing steadied slightly, becoming deeper and less desperate. Jake carefully splinted her broken wing, wrapping it in a soft cast that would let the bone heal. There was nothing they could do about the torn membrane except keep it clean and hope it would regenerate. She needs rest now. And warmth. Her body temperature is too low. Lisa pulled out a thermal blanket, the kind used for treating hypothermia in human patients. Jake wrapped Ash in the blanket and, without really thinking about it, settled into a chair beside the examination table. He kept one hand on her side, feeling the rise and fall of her breathing. It was stronger now, more regular. Lisa watched him with a mixture of concern and resignation. "You know you can't keep her, right? Once she's stable, Command will want her moved to a proper xenobiology facility. Or more likely, handed over to the military for study." Lisa's voice was gentle but realistic. "We'll deal with that when we get there. Right now, she just needs to survive the night." Jake didn't look up from Ash. He was already too attached and he knew it. That first night was the longest of Jake's life. He stayed beside Ash, monitoring her vital signs, adjusting her position to keep pressure off her broken wing, and giving her small amounts of the nutrient mix every hour. Lisa checked in periodically, bringing coffee and food that Jake barely touched. As dawn broke over Kepler 442b, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Ash's eyes opened fully for the first time. She looked at Jake with what seemed like recognition. Her mouth opened in a weak chirp, a sound that was somehow both reptilian and oddly bird-like. "Hey there, little fighter." Jake smiled, exhaustion making him giddy with relief. "Welcome back." Over the following days, something remarkable happened. Ash didn't just survive, she began to thrive. Her appetite returned with a vengeance, and Jake found himself spending hours each day preparing food for her. She seemed to prefer meat, but also ate fruits and even some vegetables. Her scales began to brighten, losing their dull, dusty appearance and taking on a glossy sheen. The evening started like any other on Kepler 442b. Jake was in his quarters reviewing data files while Ash dozed nearby. She'd grown so much in the past few months that she barely fit in the room anymore. Her tail curled around the furniture, and her wings, now fully healed, were folded against her sides. Jake had gotten used to working with a horse-sized dragon as his constant companion. It felt normal now, which should have been his first warning that nothing about this situation was normal. The proximity alarms shattered the peaceful silence. Not the standard warning beeps they used for incoming supply ships, but the shrieking emergency klaxons that Jake had only heard during drills. His coffee mug slipped from his hand, shattering on the floor. Ash's head snapped up, her whole body going rigid. A low, rumbling growl built in her chest, a sound Jake had never heard her make before. "Jake, we've got incoming." Lisa's voice crackled over the intercom, tight with panic. "Something big just entered atmosphere. Really big. It's coming in fast and it's coming straight for us." Jake ran to the window. The sky above the outpost was splitting apart, literally tearing open with flames as something massive pushed through the atmosphere. The friction created a light show that would have been beautiful if it wasn't so terrifying. Chunks of superheated air peeled away from the descending object, leaving trails of fire across the darkening sky. Then he saw her. The mother dragon. Velcro. She was beyond massive. Where Ash was the size of a horse, this creature was the size of a building. Actually, she was bigger than several buildings put together. 200 feet of pure predator, with wings that blocked out the stars when she spread them. Her scales were dark, almost black, but covered in scars that gleamed silver in the fading light. Each scar told a story of a battle survived, an enemy destroyed. This wasn't just an animal. This was a living weapon with centuries of experience. Velcro hit the ground like a meteor strike. The impact sent shockwaves through the earth that knocked Jake off his feet. The eastern wall of the outpost simply ceased to exist, blown apart by the force of her landing. Debris rained down everywhere. Alarms were screaming now, mixing with the shouts of researchers scrambling for safety. Jake pulled himself up and ran outside. He knew he should hide, should get to the bunkers like everyone else, but Ash was already moving toward her mother. He couldn't let her face this alone. When he burst through the door, he stopped dead. The scene before him looked like something from a nightmare. Velcro stood in the ruins of the wall, her massive head swiveling to survey the outpost. Her eyes glowed with an inner fire, ancient and intelligent and completely devoid of mercy. When she spoke, her voice didn't come from her mouth. Instead, it boomed from the universal translator system built into her armor. Yes, armor. She wore plates of some dark metal across her chest and shoulders, carved with symbols Jake couldn't read. I am Velcro, matriarch of the 7th Legion, commander of the Eastern Fleets, breaker of the Krell Resistance. Her voice was like thunder rolling across mountains, deep and resonant and filled with absolute authority. Return my offspring to me. She has been contaminated by your weakness long enough. Jake's legs felt like water, but he forced himself to walk forward. Every instinct screamed at him to run, to hide, to do anything except approach this creature that could kill him with a casual swipe of her tail. But he'd made a promise to Ash months ago, even if he'd never said it out loud. He wouldn't abandon her. She's not contaminated, Jake called out, his voice embarrassingly shaky compared to Velcro's boom. Her name is Ash and she's not going anywhere she doesn't want to go. Velcro's enormous head swung toward him. Being the focus of that gaze was like standing in front of a freight train. Those eyes held the weight of centuries, of countless battles and conquered worlds. Jake felt himself being measured, assessed, and found completely insignificant. That's when Ash moved between them. She spread her wings wide, positioning herself as a barrier between Jake and her mother. It would have been laughable if it wasn't so brave. Ash was big now, sure, but next to Velcro she looked like a kitten facing down a tiger. The size difference was absurd. One of Velcro's claws was longer than Ash's entire body. She doesn't want to go with you, Jake said, finding his voice stronger now. He stepped up beside Ash, placing a hand on her shoulder. He could feel her muscles trembling, but she held her ground. Velcro's laugh was like rocks grinding together in an avalanche. The sound hurt Jake's ears even through the translator. What? You speak of want as if it matters. She is Dralvex. She exists to conquer, to dominate, to strengthen the Empire through blood and fire. She was born to be a weapon, and you have poisoned her with your human weakness. You have made her soft. I gave her food when you left her to die, Jake shot back, anger overriding his fear. I gave her shelter and care and a chance to live. If that's poison, then your whole empire is already sick. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Velcro's eyes narrowed to slits, and smoke began to curl from her nostrils. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter, which somehow made it more terrifying. You dare lecture me on strength? You whose species huddles on your little worlds, too weak to expand, too soft to take what you need? We Dralvex have ruled this galaxy for 10,000 years. We have crushed civilizations older than your entire history. We have survived by being strong, by cutting away the weak, by ensuring that only the best of us carry on. The frail do not survive. The defective are removed. It is not cruelty. It is necessity. It is the way of nature itself. It's murder, Lisa shouted from the bunker entrance, her medical training making her unable to stay silent. You can dress it up with fancy words about evolution and strength, but abandoning your children to die is just murder. We call it what it is. Velcro's massive tail lashed out, moving faster than something that size should be able to move. It smashed into a storage container, reducing the reinforced metal to twisted scrap in an instant. The casual display of power sent the message clearly. She could destroy the entire outpost without breaking a sweat. Humans, always so certain of your moral superiority. Velcro's voice dripped with contempt. You coddle your weak, celebrate your failures, give medals to those who should have been culled. And yet you wonder why you remain irrelevant in galactic affairs. Why stronger species push you aside. My daughter will return with me. She will be properly trained. She will learn what she was born to be, not this pathetic mockery you've created. That's when Ash spoke for the first time. Jake had built a translator collar for her months ago, adapting human technology to work with Dralvek's vocal structures. Her voice came through it now, young but steady, filled with a conviction that surprised even Jake. No. The single word dropped into the tension like a stone into still water. Everything stopped. The wind seemed to pause. Even the emergency alarms faded into the background. Velkra's entire body went absolutely still, in the way that predators do right before they strike. What did you say? Velkra's voice was barely a whisper now, transmitted through her translator with deadly precision. I said no, Mother. Ash's voice grew stronger, more confident. Jake didn't poison me. He didn't make me weak. He showed me something you never could. He showed me that strength can come from protection, not just destruction. That power can be used to help, not just hurt. That family isn't just about blood and breeding. It's about who chooses to stand beside you when everything goes wrong. Jake felt his throat tighten. He'd never heard Ash speak like this before, with such clarity and purpose. He fed me when I was starving. He healed my wing when it was broken. He sat with me through the pain and the fear. He taught me that being strong doesn't mean being alone. You left me on those rocks to die, and he gave me a reason to live. So no, I'm not going with you. I'm not becoming what you want me to be. I'm staying right here. The silence that followed was suffocating. Velkra stared at her daughter, and for just a moment, Jake saw something flicker across that ancient face. Confusion maybe, or disbelief. As if the matriarch was trying to process something that simply didn't fit into her understanding of the universe. Then that moment passed and pure rage took its place. The Battle of Kepler 442b lasted 6 hours and left the research outpost in ruins. Jake barely remembered most of it. There were flashes of memory, Velkra's roar splitting the air, Ash fighting desperately against her own mother, Lisa dragging wounded researchers into the bunkers while the world exploded around them. The defense turrets had fired everything they had, railgun rounds screaming through the air, but they might as well have been throwing pebbles at a mountain. When Velkra finally retreated into the sky, she left a crater where the eastern section used to be and a promise that chilled Jake to his bones. The Empire will hear of this abomination. Your world will burn human. We will cleanse this infection before it spreads. 3 days later, Jake found himself sitting in the witness chamber of the United Human Systems Congress, staring at 300 holographic representatives from every human colony in known space. The chamber was enormous, a circular room with tiered seating that rose up like an amphitheater. Each seat held a shimmering hologram of a senator or representative, all of them shouting at once. Jake had never felt so small. He was still wearing bandages from the battle, his left arm in a sling from where falling debris had caught him. Ash was being held in a military facility somewhere, separated from him for the first time since he'd found her. That separation hurt worse than his injuries. The chaos in the chamber was overwhelming. On the massive screen behind the podium, security footage from the outpost played on repeat. Velkra's landing. The destruction. The battle. Over and over again, a reminder of what Jake's actions had unleashed. Admiral Rebecca Cole stood at the central podium, her face grim. She was a career military officer, 60 years old with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen too many wars. She'd been trying to establish order for the past 20 minutes without success. Order. Cole's voice cut through the noise like a whip crack. We need order in this chamber now. She slammed her fist down on the podium, and the sound echoed through the space. Gradually, reluctantly, the shouting died down to angry murmurs. Cole's gaze fixed on Jake, and he felt pinned by it like a butterfly on a board. Dr. Mitchell. Your actions on Kepler 442b have triggered what military intelligence considers an extinction-level threat. The Dralvek's Empire has issued a formal ultimatum to the United Human Systems. They demand that we surrender both you and the creature to Imperial custody within 72 hours, or they will consider it an act of war. They have mobilized their 7th Fleet. That's over 200 warships, Doctor. 200 ships like the one that nearly destroyed your outpost with a single soldier. What do you have to say for yourself? Jake stood up slowly, his legs shaky. Every eye in the chamber was on him. He could see the fear in their faces, the anger, the desperate hope that he had some answer that would make this all go away. He took a deep breath. I'd do it again. The chamber exploded. Representatives were on their feet, shouting, some in support but most in fury. Someone threw a data pad that passed harmlessly through a hologram. Security officers moved toward the doors, ready to restore order by force if necessary. Cole's face went red. You would doom humanity for one animal? You would sacrifice billions of lives for your pet. She's not an animal, Admiral. Jake's voice was quiet, but somehow it carried through the chaos. And she's not a pet. Ash is a person. She thinks. She feels. She makes choices. She has hopes and fears and dreams. Everything we think we know about the Dralvex is based on watching their warriors in battle or studying their empire from a distance. But we've never seen what they could be if someone actually cared about them. Senator David Park stood up, his hologram flickering slightly. Park represented the Tau Ceti colonies, home to nearly 1 billion people. His voice was measured, controlled, but Jake could hear the fear underneath. Dr. Mitchell, let's assume for a moment that you're correct. Let's say this creature is sapient and capable of all the things you claim. That doesn't change our situation. We're talking about the Dralvex Empire. They control 40% of the known galaxy. They've been expanding for thousands of years. They fought the Kryn Collective, a species with technology centuries ahead of ours, to a complete standstill for 300 years. What chance do we have against that kind of power? I'm not suggesting we fight them, Jake said. The room quieted a bit, people leaning forward to hear. I'm suggesting we offer sanctuary. The silence that followed was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop in that massive chamber. Representatives stared at Jake like he'd suggested they all jump into the sun. Explain yourself, Doctor. Cole's voice was dangerously calm. And quickly. Jake pulled out his datapad with his good hand and activated it. Data began streaming onto the main screen, replacing the battle footage. Graphs, behavioral observations, cognitive test results, all the documentation he'd kept on Ash over the past months. For 6 months, I've been documenting Ash's development. These are her problem-solving scores. These are her emotional response patterns. This is her language acquisition rate. Every single metric shows cognitive abilities that match or exceed human baseline intelligence. She understands abstract concepts like justice and loyalty. She makes moral judgments. She creates art for God's sake. She draws pictures of things she wants to remember. Jake pulled up a sketch that made his throat tight. Ash had drawn it last month using a stylus adapted for her claws. It showed Jake and her sitting together watching the sunset. The proportions were off and the perspective was wrong, but the emotion in it was clear. None of this exists in Imperial Dralvex behavioral profiles, Jake continued. Every study we have shows them as efficient killers with limited emotional range and no creative thinking beyond tactical adaptation. But that's not because they're incapable of these things. It's because they're traumatized from birth. They're raised in a culture that literally murders children for showing weakness. That kills them for asking questions or expressing fear or wanting connection. The Empire doesn't create warriors. It creates damaged survivors and calls that strength. Representative Maria Santos from the Luna colony spoke up, her voice skeptical. So your theory is that the most dangerous predator species in the galaxy is actually just misunderstood? That they're mean because they had bad childhoods? I'm saying that Ash proves their system is a choice, not a biological imperative, Jake replied. She fights harder to protect me than any Imperial warrior fights for conquest. Why? Because she has something worth protecting. Because she knows what it's like to be cared for, and she'll die before she lets anyone take that away. Imagine what happens if we offer that same choice to other hatchlings. You want to steal their children, someone said from the back, making it sound like an accusation. I want to save their children, Jake corrected. The Empire abandons thousands of hatchlings every year. They leave them on hostile planets to die slowly. What if we offered those hatchlings sanctuary? What if we gave them what we gave Ash? Food, shelter, safety, and a chance to choose who they want to become. Senator Park shook his head. Even if some hatchlings accepted, the Empire would see it as an act of war anyway. You're talking about undermining their entire culture. Their culture is built on child murder, Lisa said from the gallery. She'd been sitting quietly until now, but Jake could see she couldn't stay silent anymore. I'm a doctor. I took an oath to do no harm. Everything the Dralvex Empire does violates that oath on a fundamental level. Maybe it's time someone told them that's not okay. Admiral Cole held up a hand for silence. She studied the data on the screen, her expression unreadable. When she spoke, her voice was thoughtful. This is either brilliance or suicide. Possibly both. She turned to face the full Congress. But Dr. Mitchell raises a point we can't ignore. We've been assuming the Dralvex are monolithic, that every member of their species thinks like they're warriors. What if that's wrong? What if there's a silent majority of their population that hates what their empire has become? The first young Dralvex arrived just 3 days after the announcement went out. She was barely alive, her body weak from hunger, and Imperial hunters were right behind her. The human ship Defiant caught her emergency signal near the Proxima border and rushed in to save her, dodging enemy fire the whole way. Her name was Kindle and she was only 6 months old. Within a week, 12 more showed up. By the time a month had passed, 300 young Dralvex had found their way to human space. Jake was completely overwhelmed. He worked 18 hours every single day at the new sanctuary they'd set up on Luna Station. Every young refugee who arrived brought heartbreaking stories with them. Stories of brothers and sisters killed just for asking too many questions. Stories of mothers who treated kindness like it was a sickness. An entire civilization that had somehow turned cruelty into something completely normal. One of the medical staff walked up to Jake with a tablet full of reports. "Look at these intake files. This little one watched her own brother get executed just because he shared his food with someone. This one here was beaten bloody for crying. Another had her wing deliberately broken as some kind of twisted training exercise. Jake, every single one of these kids has gone through trauma that should make helping them absolutely impossible. And yet," she pointed toward the large observation window. Down below in the play area, dozens of young Dralvex were interacting with each other. They moved carefully, almost hesitantly, as they learned what gentleness actually felt like from the human volunteers working with them. Ash moved through the group like a protective guardian, showing them through his own actions how to be different. Jake pressed his hand against the glass and spoke softly. "They want to be good. They've always wanted to be good. They just never had anyone show them how." Then suddenly warning sirens started blaring throughout the entire station. The Imperial First Fleet appeared from slipspace like monsters from everyone's worst nightmares. 200 massive warships surrounded all of human-controlled space. These weren't normal ships. They were biological nightmares, living vessels that made anything humanity had ever built look like children's toys. Leading them was the dreadnought Infinite Talon, and commanding that ship was Matriarch Velcro herself. Admiral Cole's face appeared on every screen across the human fleet. His voice was steady but urgent. "All civilian ships need to evacuate immediately to the inner system. All military vessels move into defensive positions. This is not a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill." Jake sprinted to the command center, his heart pounding. "Admiral, please let me try talking to them. Maybe we can still." Cole cut him off immediately. "There's no maybe left anymore, Doctor. They're here for blood and nothing else." His face was set in grim determination. "Velcro sent us a message already. She's demanding that we hand over every single refugee for what she called corrective processing. And she wants you specifically. She wants to execute you publicly." Jake felt his blood run cold. "What did you tell her?" Cole's expression shifted into something hard and fierce. A dangerous smile crossed his face. "I told her she's welcome to try and take them." The command center erupted into controlled chaos as officers rushed to their stations. Outside the windows, human warships were moving into formation, creating a protective barrier around Luna Station and the hundreds of young Dralvex sheltering there. Jake looked back toward the sanctuary wing where all those kids were probably scared and confused by the alarms. Kids who'd already been through hell. Kids who'd finally found safety, only to have their nightmare follow them here. He turned back to Cole. "What are our chances?" The Admiral didn't sugarcoat it. "Against a fleet that size? We're outnumbered and outgunned. Their ships are bigger, their weapons are more advanced, and they've been bred for war for thousands of years." He paused, then added, "But they've never fought humans before. They've never fought anyone who actually had something worth protecting." Jake nodded slowly. "Those kids down there, they're not going back. Whatever it takes." "Whatever it takes," Cole agreed. The comm systems crackled to life. Velcro's voice filled the command center, cold and sharp like broken glass. "Humans, you harbor criminals and traitors. You corrupt our youth with poisonous ideals. Return what belongs to the Empire within 1 solar hour, or we will take them by force. Your species will learn the price of interference." Cole didn't hesitate. He opened the channel and responded. "Matriarch Velcro, this is Admiral Cole of the Human Defense Fleet. Those refugees requested asylum and we granted it. They're under our protection now. If you want them, you'll have to go through every ship, every station, and every human willing to stand between you and them." There was a long, tense silence. Then Velcro laughed. It was a terrifying sound. "So be it. Your compassion will be your extinction." The transmission cut out. For a moment, everything was quiet except for the hum of the station's systems. Then all across the fleet, weapon systems powered up. Shields activated. Crews moved to battle stations. The first battle for humanity's soul was about to begin. The ceasefire held for 3 days. 3 long, tense days where nobody quite knew what would happen next. Velcro's massive flagship stayed at the edge of the solar system, just sitting there. Not attacking but not leaving either. Meanwhile, human forces kept their defensive positions, working frantically to treat the wounded and patch up damaged stations. The young Dralvex refugees were mourning their dead. 43 of them had been killed in the battle. They were just kids who'd been caught in the crossfire, and humans gave them full military funerals with honors usually reserved for fallen soldiers. Jake forced himself to attend every single funeral. He owed them that much. Ash stood beside him at each one, silent and grieving. These weren't just casualties to them. They were kids who'd finally found hope, only to have it ripped away. On the 4th day, something unexpected happened. Velcro sent a communication requesting a meeting. Just 3 individuals, herself, Jake, and Ash. No weapons allowed. No backup forces. No tricks. Admiral Cole was convinced it was a trap. "Doctor, this has ambush written all over it. She's probably planning to take you both hostage." Jake knew the risks, but he went anyway. Some chances were worth taking. They arranged to meet on a neutral asteroid that orbited between their positions. Engineers quickly constructed a pressurized dome there, a temporary structure that could barely contain what was about to happen inside it. Velcro arrived first. Her enormous form had to squeeze through the reinforced entrance, and even then it was a tight fit. But something about her seemed different. She still had that massive, intimidating presence, but something fundamental had shifted. She looked almost uncertain. Like a foundation she'd built her entire life on had developed cracks. Jake and Ash entered from the opposite side. For a moment, nobody spoke. The silence was heavy with the weight of everything that had happened. Finally, Velcro broke the quiet. Her voice lacked the thunderous authority it usually carried. "I have commanded war fleets for 3 centuries. 300 years of perfecting the art of creating warriors. I have systematically eliminated weakness from my ranks and forged strength through violence and blood. I thought I understood power better than anyone in the galaxy." She paused, and when she continued, there was something broken in her tone. "And then in just 3 days, everything I've ever believed was proven completely false." Jake remained quiet, sensing she needed to say this. Needed to get it out. Velcro's clawed hand gestured vaguely toward where Luna Station hung in space. "My warriors fight for dominance. They fight for rank advancement. They fight to survive another day in a culture that demands constant proof of strength. That's what warfare means to us. That's what I thought strength was." Her voice cracked slightly. "But those children up there on your station. I watched the battle recordings. Those refugees threw themselves into the line of fire to protect evacuation shuttles. They positioned their bodies between plasma blasts and wounded humans they'd only known for a few weeks. Some of them died shielding your medics. That shouldn't be possible according to everything we know about survival instinct. It violates every principle of strength we've built our empire on." Ash moved forward, stepping into his mother's line of sight. "That's because you've spent your entire life mistaking cruelty for strength. You've confused brutality with power. Real strength isn't about dominating others or surviving by stepping on corpses. Real strength is choosing to protect someone vulnerable even when it puts you at risk. That's what Jake showed me. That's what humans understand that we never did." Velcro looked at her son for a long moment. Really looked at him, maybe for the first time. "By that definition, I am weak. I am the weakest creature in this system. I abandoned you when you needed me most. I left you to die alone because I thought that was how to create strength. And somehow, against all logic, you became stronger than any warrior I've ever trained in my 3 centuries of command." Jake spoke carefully, weighing every word. "You're not weak, matriarch. You're a product of your culture. You were shaped by a system that taught you those values from birth. But here's the thing about culture. It's not permanent. It can change. It can evolve. The real question isn't whether you're strong or weak. The question is whether you actually want things to be different." Velcro went completely silent. The only sound in the dome was the quiet hum of life support systems recycling air. Jake could see her processing this, her predator eyes distant as she traveled somewhere in her memory. When she finally spoke again, her voice had dropped to barely a whisper. It was strange hearing such a massive creature sound so small. "I remember my mother. I was only 5 months old, barely able to hunt on my own. She took me to a volcanic planet, a hellish place where the air burned and food was scarce. And then she just left. Abandoned me there to prove I was strong enough to survive." Velcro's claws scraped against the metal floor. "I survived by eating the corpses of my siblings who'd been left there before me. I learned to view every other living thing as either a threat or a resource. I learned that showing care for anything was a death sentence. That mercy was just another word for suicide. And I built my entire existence around that single brutal lesson. 3 centuries of life, all based on what I learned in those first terrifying months alone on that burning rock. She looked directly at Jake, and for the first time he saw something in those alien eyes that looked almost like desperation. How do you unlearn 300 years of survival instinct? How do you reprogram an entire species that's been shaped by 10,000 generations of this brutality? Jake met her gaze steadily. The same way you'd climb any impossible mountain. One step at a time. And by accepting that it's going to be painful and slow and you'll probably fail 100 times before you succeed. Retry.